Welcome you all. Welcome to our panel entitled Turkey's Changing Geopolitical Position. Today we are going to talk about Turkish foreign policy. This is the panel, which is a part of series of panel organized by Communication Directorate under the Turkish Republic Presidency. So today we have distinguished, speakers. First of all, I will give the floor to Turkey's ambassador to United Kingdom, Mr. Ümit Yalçın, and then I'm going to give the floor to Professor William Hale, and we have also Bruno Maçes, and we have also distinguished speaker from Turkey, Berat Çonkar. He is the member of parliament from AK Party's side. So, as you know, Turkish foreign policy has been under fundamental, transformation since the 15 July failed coup attempt. Today, we are going to discuss the post 15 July, actually, development, foreign policy development and geopolitical developments regarding Turkey and Turkey's involvement into the different crises across the region, from Libya to Syria. So today we are trying to find a very comprehensive explanation regarding the post 15 July failed coup attempt in Turkey. So first of all, I would like to start with Ambassador Ümit Yalçın to give his welcoming remarks, and then we are going to proceed to the panel. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Murat. And first of all, I would like to thank Directorate of Communications of the Presidency for organizing this panel. And also, I would like to welcome and thank to our guests, Professor William Hale and Dr. Bruno Maçes. They will share their views on Turkish geopolitical situation in the aftermath of July the 15th coup attempt. And also, I would like to welcome Mr. Berat Çonkar. He is participating to this panel from Turkey. He's a good friend of mine. I am very happy to see you all healthy after a long lockdown period of pandemic. And of course, for diplomats or intellectuals or politicians, face-to-face meetings or conferences in the room or hall are more effective tool for all of us, but this video conference is now our new normal, and because of that reason we are today coming together through this technological system. Fortunately, from different regions of the world, we can come together and talk on very important issue. Of course, after 4 years of coup attempt in Turkey, at home, especially in Turkey, we discussed a lot of the repercussions of this coup attempt. I mean, there were many books, documentaries, films, conferences, panels. But of course, it is also very important for foreign world, for international community to understand the impact or the repercussions of coup attempt, Turkish domestic or foreign policy as well. Because of that reason, these kind of discussions are very useful to understand. I mean, what has happened, Turkish foreign affairs, and what are the effect or impact of that coup attempt on those affairs. When I was trying to invite some friends and some guests for this panel, in some circles I observed some reluctance that they don't want to discuss this issue as if this is only a domestic issue. In fact, it is not correct. Of course, it is not only a domestic issue which happened 4 years ago and the other night it finished. No, the repercussions are still in our agenda, because 4 years ago that coup attempt by the terrorist organization FETÖ attempted these things. First, they attempted against democracy, and they try to take over the administration, the government, by force. And secondly, they were against parliament, and they bombed the parliament. And thirdly, they were against the elected president, and they attempted to his life. And fourthly, they attempted against people. They killed 251 civilians. And with this opportunity, I would like to commemorate our martyrs with respect. Of course, when any coup attempt in any part of the world is against democracy, parliament, elected president, and people, I think everywhere and every time it should be considered as a big threat, not only for that individual country, but also for the security of all the world and all the principles of the international community. And because of that reason, we are still discussing and talking this issue, because the repercussions, the results, the effects of that coup attempt are still in our agenda, and we are still continuing our fight against that terrorist organization. And nobody can ignore these repercussions and these profound shocks effects in our domestic and foreign policy. Of course, in the aftermath of that coup attempt, we couldn't get support or empathy from international community, especially from our Western allies. And it created a trust problem. And that distrust, especially in our people's, in Turkish public opinion, was profound and very great. And that distrust reflected in many issues between Turkey and the USA, Turkey and the EU for the past 4 years. Maybe here I should underline one exception, that the United Kingdom. They immediately sent their envoy to Turkey after that coup attempt, and they condemned unequivocally, and they showed their solidarity and support with Turkey. And if today we are enjoying excellent relations with the UK, there's no doubt that that day, 4 years ago, their show of support to us has an important role in that. For instance, when we ask this question, I think this is a very legitimate question to understand or to discuss Turkish foreign policy affairs. Can you imagine the mastermind of that coup attempt, Fethullah Gülen, is still in the USA and free? And now, how can we be more effective and also willing to our bilateral relations with the USA, as if nothing happened, as if that guy is still there and free? And if we look at the 4-year problems between Turkey and USA, we can easily observe that distrust in our many issues, many thorny issues, many contentious issues. And we cannot ignore that night's distrust problem in those affairs. Also, main challenges in our bilateral relations with the EU and with many European countries are again mainly based on that security sensitivity of Turkey. Despite that shocking historic day for Turkey and that distrust, we, for the last 4 years, try to pursue principled foreign policy. We aim to establish a circle of peace, prosperity, and stability in our neighborhood. And we, again, try to conduct enterprising and humanitarian foreign policy. And our main priorities, main objectives in our foreign policy never change. And they are advancing strategic relations, promoting crisis management and helping build stability, protecting the rights of Turkish citizens abroad, fighting against terrorism, outreach to all geographies, to Latin America, Africa, to Asia, working to increase cooperation with global and regional institutions, and strengthening Turkey's soft power. These are and have been and will be our main Turkish foreign policy priorities, despite all that distrust problem or our security challenges. And maybe lastly, I should also underline one thing. That night, 4 years ago, the main target for that terrorist organization was legitimacy. They were against legitimate parliament, legitimate president, legitimate rights of people in Turkey. And as we have pursued principled policy before that night, we continued our principled policy after that night to support legitimacy everywhere. If you are, international community, try to understand what are we doing in Syria, what are we doing in Libya, or what are we doing in Eastern Mediterranean or Cyprus, the key word, all of these things, of course, every issue has different aspects, but one common thing is legitimacy. When we are trying to make something in drilling around Cyprus, we are there to protect the legitimate rights of Turkish Cypriots. If for the last 10 years we are in Syria, it is because of the legitimate rights of Syrian people against illegitimate regime. And for Libya, we are supporting the legitimate government of Libya against warlords. Because of that reason, whatever we are trying to do, or we have been trying to do for the last 4 years in regional or global issues, also should be or can be understood from the perspectives or repercussions of the coup attempt 4 years ago. I want to stop here, and I hope I try to put some encouraging points or question marks in our guest's mind. And then I would like to listen their views on our foreign policy, on our geopolitical situation and regional policies, because I know all of them are very distinguished friends and guests. And then at the end, maybe I will share very brief views on those speeches. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. It was a very, fruitful introduction, and I think it will also help to facilitate our discussion. So, Professor William Hale, you have been extensively working on Turkish foreign policy. You have published many books and articles regarding the Turkish foreign policy. And I actually have been teaching Turkish foreign policy at my university, and I used your book, Turkish Foreign Policy. Actually, your second version of book is talking about AK Parti's foreign policy, but it actually ended up in the early stage of Arab Spring, right? So after the Arab Spring, what is your idea about Turkey's geopolitical position and foreign policy? What would you write about Turkish foreign policy if you have another change to add another chapter to your Turkish foreign policy? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Yeşiltaş. I'm glad my book has been of some use to you, but as you say, it's rather out of date now. I finished it, 8 years ago, so there's quite a lot to be added to it. It's interesting you should ask, but actually my publishers did ask me whether I could write an updated edition of it, and I've been putting off doing that because I thought we must have a resolution to this problem or that problem, and I could look back on it and so on. So far I haven't done anything about that, and you face me with a difficult problem because you have to make me decide right now what I would put in it if I were going to do that job. So thanks very much for the prompt. You've given me a difficult job. Can I start off by saying something about additional to what Ambassador Yalçın has said, particularly because if you look at the effects of the 2016 attempted coup d'etat on Turkish foreign policy, well, obviously the most important immediate one is the problem of Gülen living there in Pennsylvania, and frequent attempts by the Turkish government to have him extradited to Turkey, which has been a real problem in Turkish-American relations I understand it, and I'm not an expert on the American legal system, but as I understand it, if there were a case for his extradition to Turkey, this would have to be decided first of all by a district court in Pennsylvania. And even if that judgment went against him, and it might not, he could then appeal to a higher court and so on and so on. And so it could eventually go up to the Supreme Court even. So the legal processes in America, even if they were instituted, and I have doubts that they ever would be, but even if they were instituted, would take a very long time with an uncertain outcome, to be frank. To be honest about it, I think the only reasonable expectation out of all this is that maybe the next American president, it looks likely to be Joe Biden at the moment, would issue some sort of pronouncement saying, well, they were strongly opposed to the coup d'etat, they considered it completely illegitimate and so on and so on, but they would probably have to add that the question of extradition would have to be decided by the courts initially in Pennsylvania, then maybe at the federal level. I just don't know the details of that, but that is what I imagine would happen. If we look elsewhere at the effects of the coup d'etat, as far as Turkish foreign policy is concerned, I think it's rather difficult to assess the answer there, because I think the main problems in Turkey's foreign policy at the moment, which we can list very briefly, is first of all, obviously the situation in Syria and the related security problem as far as Turkey is concerned. Number one, this raises its, number two, its relations with Russia and also Iran. And then, of course, we have its relations with the European Union as well as the United States. So perhaps I can say as quickly as I can something about each of those. As far as Syria is concerned, of course, since 2016, we've had two important developments, which I would mention in the revision of the book. First of all, there would be the Turkish military operations in Syria between 2016 and 2018. That is to say, first of all, the occupation of the area between Jarablus and Azaz, which was known as Operation Euphrates Shield, if you remember, in 2016 to 2017. And then in 2018, we had the operation in Afrin. So we had, first of all, this emergence of a Turkish military role in collaboration with various Syrian oppositional forces in northern Syria. And of course, related to that, which was the broader problem, was the relationship between the United States and the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the principal element of which has been the PDY, which is a Kurdish force, which is basically an extension of the PKK in Syria. I think this is accepted. On that issue, I think what Turkey has to do is to try and work the problem that it's had over the last 4 years, at any rate, well, last 3 years, has been a lack of effective policy on the part of the Trump administration, and no effective policy at all on the part of the European members of NATO, if I can say so. What I would hope would happen is that after November, the Turkish government might be able to rearrange with a successor administration some resumption, for instance, of the joint patrols in northern Syria, in the SDF areas, which would hopefully stabilize that situation. But anything further than that, and in particular, dealing with the problem of Afrin, which is, as I see it, the biggest, or not Afrin, but Idlib also, which is, as I see it, the bigger of the two problems, will involve negotiations with Russia and Iran. Now, I don't like this. I wish the Western powers would take a more effective policies towards the Syrian problem. But the first objective for Turkey and for everybody else must be, please, to stop the Syrians killing one another and driving people out of their homes. This must be the first objective. And the most serious attempt to bring about some sort of new political settlement in Syria so far has probably been the Astana process, in which Moscow plays the leading role, I think it has to be said. In other words, if we were going to effectively evolve a solution to the Syrian problem, then the road to peace, road to Damascus, goes through Moscow, basically, like it or not. I'd like to think that the Europeans or the Americans would play a more active role in this. I would like to think that the next US administration might be able to play a more effective role, but I have to admit that as far as public opinion is concerned, certainly in Europe and I think also in the United States, there is very little enthusiasm to get further involved in the Syrian crisis. That is the Syrian problem. Broader than that, we have the relations between Turkey and the European Union. Again, here, I think there are very serious problems to be overcome. The first of them is obviously the current dispute over offshore oil rights in the Eastern Mediterranean, Cyprus, and so on. Now, I would perfectly understand the point of view that the Turkish Cypriots must be given somehow or other some fair share of whatever offshore oil resources are available in the Eastern Mediterranean, fair share anyway. That would be a reasonable objective, but I can't see that coming about without further progress in the general relationship between Turkey and the European Union. And on that score, I think the whole question of civil liberties in Turkey is going to be absolutely essential. We've had frequent promises from the government, Mr. Çonkar might like to comment on this, to achieve improvements in the human rights regime in Turkey, but there are constant complaints, for instance, of the imprisonment of opposition members and so on, which must be addressed. These issues must be addressed if further improvement in the European relations between Turkey and the European Union is going to be achieved. I'm not suggesting this would automatically solve the Cyprus problem, but at least it would put some sort of onus on the on the EU member states to adopt a more effective policies over the Cyprus problem. That's all I can say. Thanks very much for your patience in putting up with my somewhat vapid and, I have to say, completely off-the-cuff remarks.
Thank you, Professor Hale. I would like to give the floor to Mr. Bruno. I want to raise a question about Turkey's relations with Europe. Particularly in the post-15 July failed coup attempt. How do you see the future of relationship, and how Turkey's geopolitical position has been changing? Because Turkey is very active in Syria, Turkey is very active in Mediterranean Sea, and Turkey is very active in Libya. So all these diplomatic and military activism, I think, are shaping Turkey's relations with the external world. And Europe is really important for Turkey's strategic mindset. How do you see the future of Turkey-European relations in this context, Mr. Bruno?
Are you asking me?
No. I'm directing question, Mr. Bruno.
Thank you very much for the question. It's a pleasure to be here with the ambassador and with Professor Hale. You're right. I think relations with the EU are important, difficult, have to be well managed by both sides, but particularly by Turkey, which I think is more dependent on Europe than Europe is on Turkey. And this is a fact that sometimes my Turkish friends don't fully recognize, but I do think it is a fact. We can go back to July 15, 2016. I think EU-Turkey relations is the dimension where the coup did have an impact. As someone said, that night reactions coming from the EU were, well, disappointed, with very few exceptions. Ambassador is right that the UK was an exception. Also, some of the small Baltic countries, let's not forget about them. They were tweeting, the foreign ministers, a couple of them still in office, tweeting that night against the coup and the legitimate attempts to take over power in Turkey. But for the most part, including the High Representative Mogherini, the reactions were perplexing. Let me say that. And that, of course, as the ambassador said, created a problem of trust. So in a way, there have always been problems. When I was in government just 2 years before, there have always been problems between Turkey and the EU, but many times they were not on critical issues involving the institutions and the regime. So now we have this polemic going on about Hagia Sophia. But I think both sides can well manage that. But when it reaches the very survival of democratic institutions in Turkey, then the question is obviously more serious. And people in Turkey justifiably think that the reaction from the EU should have been different. The misunderstanding is really staggering between the two sides, and it was revealed that day. For many months afterwards, not to say years, people in Brussels told me that they didn't believe there was any coup in Turkey whatsoever. And this is high-level officials believing that or wanting to believe that. So it revealed the level of misunderstanding, and it created a powerful dynamic of mistrust, which lasts to this day. But I think it was different from other cases in the past, because in Turkey it was taken as obviously much more serious. And it has been difficult to recover from that. I think relations fundamentally changed that day between the EU and Turkey. I don't think I'll be going too far if I say that essentially now the accession project can be used for political purposes, but it's no longer a realistic possibility. And this is recognized on both sides. Now, people might say even before 2016, it was not realistic. I'm not quite sure, because remember that year, 2015, Turkey and the EU were working quite productively on the refugee crisis. And I know some people in Turkey regarded that as perhaps a rekindling of the relationship, and all that ended on July 15, 2016. What is the bright spot in relations? I think there actually is one. Politically, the relationship is very fraught. Almost every month, there's one more focus of conflict and distrust. The Eastern Mediterranean one is particularly acute. Relations with France continue to deteriorate. There was even an issue with the non-essential traveling list of countries recently. And many other issues. The Volkswagen factory in Izmir that was cancelled. You know, if one follows these developments, they happen certainly every month. But I do think it is possible to make a distinction here between political relations, which are in a crisis since 2016 and no real possibility of improvement, in my opinion, and the economic relationship that continues to be very sound and very appreciated by both sides. I think this is important. And it's particularly important because it's at a time when the EU regards its economic relationship with China as becoming very difficult, and with the US as well. And even Brexit with the UK raises those kind of issues. But with Turkey, I think both sides understand the relationship as being for the mutual interest of both sides. and the customs union has been particularly important for Turkey, but also for the EU. Value chains have developed. They are very deep. You can see the impact of anything that happens in Europe and Turkey, and vice versa. I remind you that last summer, I lived most of my time in Istanbul, actually, not at the present moment, but we'll probably be going back in August. And I remember last summer, of course, there was a moment of economic crisis, which then didn't fully materialize in Turkey. And you could, but things were difficult for a while. And you could see the impact in Germany. You could see the numbers of GDP in Germany suffered, and in large part because of that, particularly Germany and Turkey. Their economies are deeply integrated and interdependent. So I don't see any of the dynamics of economic confrontation and competition, which have been hardening when it comes to EU-China, EU-US, and others important bilateral relationships. I think it's quite possible for Turkey, and I know this is a priority of Turkish foreign policy, to try to keep separate the economic relationship and the political relationship. Libya obviously is going to be a flashpoint, but it is possible, I think, to keep that separate from the economic relationship. One French MEP today made some statements about Turkey and Libya. Manfred Weber from EPP a few days ago, statements that, you know, if you really take them literally, you see how difficult political relations are right now. But it's possible to preserve the economic relationship. So let me just make 2 or 3 very quick comments on the more general question of geopolitics. I won't develop them because I took too long developing the EU-Turkey angle. But what do I think about the impact of the coup attempt? I think it's obvious to an outside observer that the effectiveness of the Turkish state increased. We heard many stories in 2017 about if you have a parallel state, then you don't have an efficient state. I remember hearing from a Turkish minister who's no longer in office, how his head of cabinet was essentially appointed for him when he arrived at the ministry by the FETÖ organization, and he never knew who he was, but that's the person they wanted to have next to him. He was an important minister. I think these things have disappeared, and you see the effectiveness of the state is different, more able to conduct an ambitious, bold foreign policy. Counterterrorism policy has also improved dramatically. So I think that's how it looks to an external observer. Relations with the US have improved after Obama. I don't know if this is surprising or not. Maybe Professor Hale can talk about this. Very good personal relationship between Presidents Trump and Erdogan. But also, I think, let me be honest about this, I think Trump, he thinks about things, anything that is the opposite of Obama is good for him. So I think once he understood that Obama didn't particularly like Erdogan, to put it mildly, and that the U.S. Department of State didn't particularly like Turkey, I think that was enough for Trump to conclude that he liked Turkey and he liked Erdogan. That's how I read the situation. But it's had an impact on the ground. The turn to the east that people talked about, I had a chapter in my book in 2018 that Turkey was turning to the east. Hasn't quite happened. Turkey has stayed very comfortably and happily in the middle, turning to the US, turning to Europe. Europe more difficult, as I talked about, but certainly has become a counterweight to Russian power in Syria and in Libya. I think this should be recognized by people in Europe and the US. What would be of Idlib now without Turkey, and what would be a wave of refugees towards Europe from Idlib? Relationship with China has not developed. This is maybe a question for the next speaker. Berat, talk a little bit about this. Everyone is interested in knowing how Turkey regards this, but it seems not a lot seems to be happening. And finally, I'll conclude with this. I think I'm not an expert on military affairs, but it's obvious also to an external observer took many by surprise that the Turkish military of today is not the Turkish military of 10 or 20 years ago, and so allows for many more options, and particularly the drone program has turned out to be an extraordinary success, and we've been seeing that in Syria and Libya. But I do think this has taken many people by surprise, has even taken, I think, Russian military planners by surprise, as far as I can understand it. So a lot has been happening in only 4 years. A lot has been happening. Many of these developments are not connected to the coup attempt. They would have happened anyway, but the coup attempt certainly gave it a certain direction and maybe accelerated some of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. It was a very wonderful, I mean, the fruitful framework that you gave us. So I would like to move on, Mr. Berat, and by raising a very, very simple question. Actually, it's not as simple, I know, because we have a very, time problem, time constraint. But I would like to ask this question. As far as I can understand, there are 3 types of explanation regarding the Turkish foreign policy in the post-15 July military coup attempt. The first one is about, ideological transformation of Turkish foreign policy, and many scholars and experts on Turkish foreign policy claim that Turkish foreign policy ideology has been under, significant transformation. Number 2 is about the structural, transformation of Turkish foreign policy, especially this conflict spillover effect of Syrian civil war. Other regional geopolitical developments shaped Turkish foreign policy in the post-15 July coup attempt. The final, observation or claims about Turkish foreign policy is, examining the role of leadership. So they're, examining Turkish foreign policy by taking into consideration the role of President Erdogan. So my question here is how we should make sense of Turkish foreign policy, how we should make sense of this geopolitical transformation in Turkish foreign policy.
Thank you very much, Professor Yeşiltaş. I would like to also say my greetings to all the participants, including our ambassador, Professor Hale, and Mr. Machaz. Thank you very much for this informative seminar, and especially the question that you have asked regarding the current formulation of the Turkish foreign policy. I think that the July 15 coup attempt of 2016 has been a critical juncture for Turkey, for the Turkish Republic, for the Turkish democracy, and how the Turkish nation actually feels about its government, its democratic experience. And of course, with the people, the Turkish people stopping the bloody coup attempt with great sacrifices, I think that from then on, Turkish nation's will and understanding has been more effective in formulating the Turkish national policies, especially in the foreign policy area. We can see the effects of this. As you know, it was mentioned, Turkey has been able to conduct very critical anti-terror operations just after the coup attempt. And they were very important operations for Turkish national security. And we were not able to conduct this kind of operations if you look at the period before the coup attempt. So this shows that cleaning up the FETÖ-affiliated members of the army from the system actually gave the Turkish security structure and the army more confidence in applying a more decisive kind of operation outside of Turkey. So, as Professor Hale has mentioned, the operations that we have done in Syria actually were not supported by our allies. As you remember, we had very important criticism from Europe and United States, especially in case of the Afrin operation, the operation after the Euphrates Shield. Even in the Operation Euphrates Shield operation, where we conducted this operation against the Daesh terrorists, I can easily say that we were not getting the expected support from our allies and partners, because as you can see, the way we approach to our region was different from our allies. So what I'm trying to actually stress is this: Turkey, after the coup attempt, started to shape its foreign policy and its operations based on its national interests, the way that the people of Turkey actually expected from its government. Now the Turkish government started to reflect this expectations that it also believed was important for Turkey to the field. So the importance of the cleaning up the system from the FETÖ elements was so crucial for us. And as you know, after the coup attempt, when the process has started, the legal process has started, I was in the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. I have been in many meetings with our partners, with our allied countries, but unfortunately, we received a criticism about how we conduct these legal processes against FETÖ members, how the Turkish judicial system is conducting this. But those were so important for Turkey, so critical for Turkey, that our country could defend its national interest inside and outside of our country. So without cleaning up the system from FETÖ, it wouldn't be possible to conduct this kind of foreign policy. Then we can point that in the Eastern Mediterranean, the developments are taking shape, and we are seeing some of our allies and partners again coming together and trying to isolate Turkey. And we were in a position again to defend our national interest, national security, and basically Turkey had to apply its own, or how we can say, much more independent type of action in this area as well. In the Libya case, our agreement with Libya, with the legitimate government there, as you can observe, Turkey had to act alone again. And of course, we would like to bring our allies and partners together and to be on the correct position. However, as Bruno or Professor Hale has mentioned, there are differences from European Union side or from US side as far as what are our interests are in this region. So Turkey's position and Turkish foreign policy position after the coup attempt basically clarifies one thing very clearly. We are ready to be a dependable, secure ally inside NATO. We want to be a good partner for European Union as a member candidate. Our candidacy is also put on hold, but we are ready to cooperate. But the most critical thing is that we need to make sure that our partners and allies accept Turkey's legitimate national expectations, Turkey's legitimate rights, as in the case of Cyprus or in Eastern Mediterranean or in Syria. We would like to see this understanding and empathy from our partners, because we believe that Turkey-United States relationship is an important relationship, even though we have important problems. And Turkey-European Union relationship is also a critical relationship. This has economic dimension, this has social dimension, it has geopolitical dimension, it has energy dimension. And with the elimination of veto from the system, now we are at a position that our partners, our allies, try to come to terms with the new situation. Because when you look at the Turkish society, the Turkish nation, you will see that maybe most of them, maybe 95% or more than 95%, have very strong negative reaction or emotions or understanding against veto. So without the affiliation, the party affiliation, political ideology doesn't make any difference. Whoever comes to power in Turkey is going to be against veto, fighting with a veto, and this kind of illegal structures. And our Western partners should come to a position that we have a new reality. If the Turkish nation has a very strong will and emotion about this group, we also need to adjust our positions. We need to also make sure that the Turkish nation sees that in Europe or in the United States, we also care about Turkish nation's interests or security. I think this is the most important issue. As a parliamentarian, I would like to convey this message to our friends in the West, especially that we would like to be a country that can be trusted, that can be cooperated with, and it would be possible for Turkey to bring very positive, actually, contributions to our partners if we get the same kind of reaction, if we get the same kind of attitude from our partners. When Bruno mentions that European Union has a different view from Turkey, for example, in the case of Cyprus, actually, how we see it from Ankara is this: because of the interest of southern Cyprus government there, and since they are inside the European Union with a process which is not actually satisfactory for Turkey, and which cannot be even actually defended by the European Union, because without solving the problems in Cyprus with the Turkish Cypriots there, it was taken inside the European Union with a very wrong process. So now that kind of wrong decision by the European Union now is multiplied. The problem is multiplied because now they would like to use European Union, they would like to block Turkey, and they basically harm the relationship between Turkey and the other European countries. So I think that we have to be very honest, very clear when we look at the Europe-Turkey relations, for example. If we do not go into the root causes of what we are going through today, I think we will not be able to progress further. In the past, we would have more chances to come together, to have more dialogue, and put the problems on the table and discuss. But nowadays, we are seeing that with the attempts of some countries, now even this is trying to be stopped or blocked inside of the Euro. So I think we need to be very, very careful as far as addressing the issues. The last point I would like to mention is that, of course, as a person who lived through this traumatic experience in the night of the coup attempt, it's very difficult to, of course, identify who is a criminal or who is not a criminal, who is a supporter of a terrorist group or not. This is a very difficult task. I mean, as a parliamentarian, I have come through issues. Some people say, okay, we got some wrong assessment and we were detained or arrested, but at least I would like to make sure that there is a legal process continuing as far as the rights of the Turkish citizens. They have all the means that they can apply to, including the Constitutional Court and all the other legal and judicial processes, so that they can get a fair trial and a fair decision. Turkey has not gone back as far as this kind of standards. Even I can say that after the coup attempt, with legislation, we are trying to improve the effectiveness of our judiciary system. We know the best that we have to be very fair and just as far as how we deal with our people, with our population. We are aware of this kind of issues. And I would like to make sure that if we can build the trust again with our Western partners, allied countries, and cooperate especially against the terrorist organizations, whoever they are, whoever goes and uses violence to achieve their means, if we come together in this concept, and if we can re-establish our trust, I think that many of the problems that we are talking today will disappear and will go away. So I would like to finalize my remarks with the hope that we can go in this direction.
Thank you, Mr. Çonkar. It was also a very fruitful contribution from your side. Of course, there are many challenges for Turkish foreign policy as well as Turkish relations with the external world. In this session, I would like to raise a very quick questions, and I would like to, know your idea, your assessment about the future. And I would like to start with Ambassador Yalçın by asking the very simple question. As you know, the world is under a very, fundamental challenge posed by Corona-19. I mean, Corona pandemic, coronavirus. I would like to know your assessment about the impact of coronavirus over international system and particularly Turkish foreign policy. How do you see the future of international order and particularly the location, the position of Turkey in it?
Now, very briefly, I would like to share my opinion about the future of foreign affairs in the aftermath of coronavirus. Of course, now we are still passing through that difficult period. Unfortunately, I cannot say, or we cannot say that we already overcome this pandemic. There are risks for a second wave, and still we should see the next 2-3 months, maybe 6 months, to understand that international community will overcome this pandemic or not. But at least for the difficult period of the first 3 months showed us very important lessons. One of them is not a surprising thing, not a new thing. Before the pandemic, Turkey always underlined the importance of multilateralism, and we many times criticized the multilateral system's ineffectiveness. Now, many international organizations or agencies in the past were ineffective in resolving many important issues. And because of that reason, our president's motto is word is bigger than 5, to criticize Security Council ineffectiveness, or to criticize the veto system in the Security Council, which blocks every decision or resolution for the peace or welfare of the world. And again, here we understood the importance of effective multilateral system to cooperate immediately and directly without any political exploitation or without any prejudice from any part of the world. And when the crisis started, some countries immediately started to take their unilateral actions, measures, without getting any help from any organization or from any direction from any organization. Of course, it was not good. Yes, some strong countries, or like Turkey, we have a strong health system. We immediately took measures, but it was not good for many countries. And poor countries, especially the countries which does not have strong health infrastructure or health system, then everybody, every government, every country took their own decisions, own measures, and it creates some chaos. And some countries seem to be successful. Some countries seem they were late to take some necessary measures. But at that point, we really need to see what international system, organization. Yes, World Health Organization tried to do something, but all of us knew, and we should be frank, that they were not effective, and they could not manage the international cooperation or measures from one center. And secondly, we understood that nations, regardless of their religion, color, or geography, need each other when the problem is global. It is now the health problem, but now health problem creates humanitarian problem, and at the end, everything will end up with economic problems. And most probably this health, humanitarian, and economic chain most probably will have some additional or unexpected security problems in different countries. And every problems of human being are interlinked with each other. So we cannot ignore the multilateral cooperation, multilateral effective system or leading. And also another thing which we understood during this period, that for also economic relations and problems, everybody needs each other. I mean, the protectionism or following your own way is not the solution for the human beings' economic issues globally. During the lockdown period, of course, Turkey tried to help many countries to send or to donate some PPE equipments, etc. And we try to show our solidarity and sympathy with many people, including the UK, that in this difficult time we are together, we are showing our solidarity, and I think that was an important gesture, symbolic gesture, that whenever cooperation or solidarity is needed, Turkey is trying to do her best for that. I am sure many governments, many people in the world and intellectuals understood and got those correct lessons from this pandemic. And I am optimistic for the future international cooperation, or to make the international organizations more effective in that direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Hale, how do you think about the future of the international system in the aftermath of coronavirus and its impact on Turkish foreign policy?
Yes, that's a very hard question to answer, which I have to admit I haven't thought about, to be honest with you. I mean, the point is that the COVID crisis has focused everybody's attention on a very, very serious issue of a kind which we have never previously experienced in our lifetime, and I don't suppose anybody has experienced since 1918, the great influenza pandemic. And of course, in coping with it, this is essentially been a domestic political issue in each country. There's been no overall European Union policy on COVID-19. The machinery for the EU doesn't exist to ensure it. And for instance, if we're looking at the UK, even within the UK, we have different health regimes in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and England. So we don't even have a single policy on COVID-19 within Britain, and never mind in wider Europe. About this is that in Britain, at any rate, and I can only speak as far as burning issues onto the back burner, and the most important of those, of course, is our future relationship with Europe after January of next year, when officially the transition arrangements will end. The Johnson government has been quite interesting in that it has significantly shifted its position on some economic issues domestically. That's very interesting change. It has been forced to recognize the need for greater public expenditure. It's been forced to recognize the need for more spending on welfare services, especially the health service. This has been a very important change, which we hadn't expected, to be honest, from Boris Johnson. But on the essential issue of our withdrawal from the European Union, which I personally, I have to say, heartily regret. I think it was a very serious mistake on our part, but nevertheless, I'm afraid it's happened and it's not going to go away. The issue is going to come up next January. Now, at the moment, what the government is saying is that it wants to negotiate an agreement with the European Union, which will incidentally keep Britain outside the customs union. It is very difficult to negotiate. There are strong objections to this on the European side. There are very many serious problems to be overcome. And it is possible that by 1st of January next year, we will not have had an agreement with the European Union. The danger is that we will then have to go into what is called a no-deal Brexit, which means simply that we are under WTO, World Trade Organization rules in our relationships with the European Union and incidentally with Turkey, because Turkey is a member of the customs union with the European Union. So it does affect our relationship with Turkey quite severely. I sincerely hope that we don't get a no-deal Brexit. I think there is a danger that if they did, there's a possibility that if a no-deal Brexit was on the table, that a substantial proportion of the Conservative Party say nothing of all the opposition parties in Parliament, would oppose a no-deal Brexit, and that the Johnson government would have to go back to reconsidering its options, including possibly staying in the customs union, to which there would also be strong objections on the part of the backbenchers in the Conservative Party. So this issue is going to dominate British politics over the next, over the winter, I would say. But by the end of the year, this is going to be the dominant system, always assuming that we don't get a second wave of COVID-19 and are back into the sort of situation that we were in last March, which, heaven help us, I hope we aren't. Sorry for those not very well organized remarks. I hadn't thought carefully about this. It was simply off the top of my head. My apologies for some illogicalities there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bruno, how do you think about this question? I mean, the post-coronavirus era in world politics and the Turkey's position in it. Could you please turn on mic? Okay.
I think it is good now. It is a very difficult question, actually. I have a friend who sent a book proposal to a publisher already in March at the beginning of the pandemic about the impact of COVID on world politics. And now I think he regrets it because it's been 4 months and things are still not very clear. And of course, some people think that it won't have an impact, that it will have enormous impact in our lives, but that it won't have an impact in the world system or in world politics. I think so far the impact we've seen is world politics has become more conflictual, more confrontational, particularly between the US and China. And that is certainly connected to the pandemic. I think as countries face problems responding to the pandemic, as they start to face the economic consequences, it's inevitable that their posture will be more competitive. Resources are scarcer, more limited. Their public opinions are angrier. And so it's much easier for different political and economic relationships to become more conflictual, more frayed. I think we've seen that. I think it will continue. It may potentially get worse. So it's something that the European Union has to be worried about because there's potential for conflict between member states. We have to continue following what happens with China and the United States, but I think we're reaching the point where some de-escalation is needed. When it comes to Turkey, I think the question is predominantly economic, since it does seem to me that Turkey is a country that is vulnerable to the economic consequences in many different ways. Is a country that is dependent on world trade and trade with the European Union. Crisis in the EU will be felt in Turkey. It's a country like my country, Portugal, very dependent on tourism. I think Portugal and Turkey are in the list of the top 10 countries in the world more dependent on tourism revenue. Tourism is not going to be back to what it was for maybe 5 years. That's my feeling. It's a country that is dependent on global value chains, and it's a country that is dependent on the status of its dollar reserves, which in a big global crisis is very difficult to manage. So I think there may be some people in Ankara that are worried about this and wondering if the same ambitious foreign policy of the last 2-3 years is going to be sustainable in the future. So I think this is an important question for the whole world, but for Turkey in particular.
Thank you, Mr. Rona. Mr. Berat, how do you think about the post-corona geopolitical landscape of Turkey?
Yes, of course, how we dealt with this pandemic is quite critical for us because, as Bruno has mentioned, it has pressures on the Turkish economy and the financial issues, the dollar reserves and the exchange reserves, and how we deal with our current account. These are important issues, and because the pandemic has actually struck very strongly against the economies like Turkey's economy, I think that all over the world, everybody is now very concerned about the economic and financial outcomes and how this pandemic is going to develop further may have more adverse effects on the economies. For the health and the human side of the problem, I think Turkey has been one of the most successful countries on dealing with this problem, because our government has done incredible amount of investments to our health sector, infrastructure-wise as well as the human capital-wise. I think Turkey was one of the strongest and healthiest countries as far as how its social security system and health system is run. So from that part, I think Turkey has done a good job. Especially, we tried to help out to other countries. We sent help to more than 139 countries all over the world trying to cooperate. And we wanted to also show that we have to put some international cooperation in this kind of global crisis. And I think Turkey has been quite successful in stressing the importance of the global cooperation as far as this kind of global problems. And of course, we know that there are forces against Turkey who would like to have a negative impacts on Turkish economy, and we are taking our precautions for that. We are trying to depend more on markets so that we can compensate the losses maybe coming from the tourism, as Bruno mentioned. So I think we will be able to deal with this economic side of the crisis with some new openings, I would say. But the greatest question is about the US-China rivalry, which is going worse each day from our perspective. And I think that here, with the new US government coming up next year, I hope we can put some balance and come to some common ground as world countries, how the international system will be organized, what kind of direction the world system is going to take. I think these are huge questions to deal with. And as Turkey, we would like to be a contributor to a more fair international system, financially, economically. I think we are thinking about how we can contribute with new tools, new elements, so that world countries can have better economic systems, better health systems, better social security systems. And I think we are doing some right things in Turkey that we can share with the world. And hopefully we can go back to a more cooperative world rather than the world that Bruno has mentioned, which is becoming more conflictual every day. But we will try, we will struggle to rational system where cooperation is much more valued.
Okay, thank you. The floor for your concluding remarks. Thank you. If you can turn on your microphone, please.
Okay. Thank you very much. Listening to all our friends enlightened me a lot, and I think it was useful discussion on the aftermath of coup attempt after 4 years of that coup attempt. And I took some notes of some very important statement of our friends. For instance, when Professor Hale was speaking, he mentioned something like that. He said, when Turkey engaged with Russia or Iran in Syria, he said, I don't like this engagement. He said, I prefer this engagement should have done with Western partners. And I know what he meant, of course. Yes, when we were engaging with Russia in Syria, we were not comfortable. I mean, it was not a very comfortable choice. It was necessity. It became necessity for our own security and for the security of Syrian people. If there was a queue, if there was not a reluctance from especially USA and some Western partners, then of course we would have done all these engagements with our Western allies. And also, Professor Hale very wisely mentioned the importance of Turkey for EU as well. I mean, he said Turkey is essential for EU and maybe for EU security and welfare. This is also another thing. And when also he very constructively criticized in human rights situation in Turkey, also I would like to remind our friends that if EU is sincere or frank in criticizing human rights situation in Turkey, then why don't allow us to open the chapters relevant to human rights and justice of Turkey? You know, criticizing only is very empty thing. If you want to see more improved legal system and human rights system, I mean, for EU, then they should allow us to open the relevant chapters for accession process. Then we should work together. Then it means when they are criticizing, especially EU is criticizing human rights and legal system in Turkey, I want to say that they are not very sincere. And also Bruno mentions very important things, especially he said misunderstanding is still staggering, I mean, between sides. Yes, I agree with him. As also at the beginning, I tried to explain the reason of that misunderstanding of distrust between Turkey and some Western European countries. Also, I like two things, his statement. One, yes, there were many problems. There are some problems between Turkey and some Western allies, but he said economic relations are very sound. I mean, this is very important. Still, I mean, our economic relations with European countries are our strong suit. And I believe, for instance, for Cyprus, for hydrocarbon activities can be used as a leverage to seek for resolution of the Cyprus issue. And also he mentioned a wonderful thing. Turkey is turning his face to east or west. No, he said Turkey stays happily and comfortably in the middle. I think that's very important thing and very correct thing. And also he said after the coup attempt, maybe the results of the coup attempt it gives some direction to the Turkish foreign policy and maybe accelerates some issues between Turkey and Western friends. And also Berat Çonkar underlined many important things. And one of them was after the coup, how Turkish nations will become more decisive in our foreign policy. Especially security became number one issue in our foreign policy affairs, and security related problems started to be solved by our own unilateral actions. Because why? Because in the worst time of Turkey, if we couldn't get the support of our friends, then our public start to ask this question. Then why do we still need those guys? Then if we need something for our security, why we don't take our unilateral measures? Then the answer to that question of our public started to be seen in our unilateral actions in Syria or in Libya. And yes, much more independent and unilateral actions have been taken by Turkish government just after that coup attempt. Yes, many things can be answered in our foreign policy or activities in our region by this very simple question. Turkey wanted to realize cooperation in regional issues with Western partners many times and in many places. In Syria, we many times said to our partners, let's do together what it's needed against Daesh. But they did not approach this. Then we took our unilateral action. In Cyprus, let's do together, share the energy resources between Turkish and Greek Cypriots. They said no, and then we took our unilateral action. And in Libya, let's find a political solution by supporting legitimate government based on United Nations Security Council resolutions together. And some parts said no, and then we took our unilateral actions. We are still in the same position to make common and joint actions to solve the global or regional issues with our Western allies. But if we cannot get that support or empathy, then of course, especially just after that coup attempt, we had to or have to take our unilateral actions, especially for security-related issues. For the future, yes, Bruno drew a little bit pessimistic scenario, and I tried to be a little bit optimistic. Actually, my intellectual side is pessimistic, but my diplomat side is willing to be optimistic. Otherwise, if we cannot be optimistic, then there is no job for diplomats. To save my job, I want to be optimistic for the future. Thank you very much for all your contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I would like to also thank you all the participants for their invaluable, the contribution to this panel. So I'm closing the panel, and I would like to thank you again for all, Mr. Ambassador, Ambassador Yalçın. Thank you. Professor Hale, thank you very much for your contribution. Mr. Bruno Maches, thank you very much for your contribution. And Mr. Berat Çonkar, thank you for contribution. So thank you for all.